Enola Holmes 2, out on Netflix, sequel to the 2020 film, again based on the novels by Nancy Springer, again about Sherlock Holmes's younger sister, again starring Millie Bobby Brown, Henry Cavill and Helena Bonham Carter, with David Thewlis and Sharon Duncan-Brewster rounding up the cast this time. The story picks up sometime after the events of the first part. Enola is in London permanently now. She set up her own detective agency, which is struggling because she's very much living in the shadow of her older brother. One day, she does finally get an interesting case. A young girl says her sister went missing. Turns out they're both working class, both employed at a local match factory, which recently accused the missing girl of theft. Enola goes to investigate. Turns out there's more going on, as there are shady things in the factory, there's a mysterious lover involved, and a sinister inspector that is suspicious of Enola herself. And to top it all off, Sherlock is investigating a separate case of money going missing from the Treasury Department in London. And the further he goes along, the more it becomes apparent that both of those cases are interconnected, which means Sherlock at some point will have to help Enola, and Enola will have to help Sherlock. So, much like the first film, I find it annoyingly difficult to assess because there are some things which I loved and thought were brilliant. And there are also pretty major flaws which really prevent the film from being actually good on the whole. But okay, let's start with what I enjoyed. Millie Bobby Brown is spectacular as Enola. She's got great charisma, great screen presence, superb energy that fits the character, sense of humor. I mean, you just like seeing her on screen, no questions. Similarly, the supporting cast is very good. I know many people pointed out already Henry Cavill in the first film and in this one, who once again manages to be sort of grumpily humorous as Sherlock and also steal scenes with his presence. But to me, the real standout was David Thewlis. As much as his character becomes kind of cartoonish towards the end, he manages to elevate the material he is given. And his introduction scene is just fantastic as this example of pure, delicious contempt and condescension towards Enola. Brilliantly villainous. I like the setting of Victorian London, especially as we sort of get a cross-section of it. Parts of the film happen within working class settings, and there's also a sequence at a ball for the upper classes of society, so we kind of get the whole picture. I think that the humor is great and the plotting is much better than this time around, with the movie being more tightly focused and therefore easier to engage with. However, the plot, much like the movie, is not perfect. There are some glaring holes in it which, if you think about it, should realistically mean that the movie would end halfway through if those holes weren't there. The characters just don't behave as they should. They don't do the obvious thing in order to prolong the mystery. The ending felt somewhat cheap, even though it has some basis in actual British history, but nonetheless, the way it's written just felt a little off and clunky. There's a stupid fight scene towards the end, which was just wholly unnecessary. There's also a prison break sequence, which has basically no bearing on the rest of the movie, aside from giving Helena Bonham Carter a reason to appear, a cameo, which just frustrated me because, sort of like in the first movie, it seems that there are pretty interesting things going on with her character in the meantime, but she's just kind of absent for most of the movie, and that's just the sort of background. The film never really touches on it in interesting ways. I also thought that the film was too long by about 20 minutes or so, which I think could easily have been fixed by cutting the prison sequence and the fight scene. And finally, the editing is strangely choppy and jumpy. In some slower scenes even, it's almost jarring how quick the cuts are. I have no idea why that happened, because it's not like it was put there, as Hollywood usually does, to hide poor fight choreography. It's in slower scenes of conversation, and the cuts are just randomly quickly going left. I don't know why that happened. Also, this is not a criticism, but a sort of strange observation. The layout and look of Sherlock's apartment is basically copied from the BBC show. And then to top it off, there's a scene happening at the apartment of Lord Tewkesbury, which is the same apartment with slightly different furniture and more plants in it. But it's very clear that it's the same rooms, the same layout, the doors are in the same places. It's just hilariously obvious how the filmmakers just reused the same set for multiple scenes. Anyway, at the end of the day, I found the film to be sort of frustratingly average, because as much as I enjoyed the performances, locations, and most of the plot, I couldn't really excuse the last 30 minutes, the pacing issues and the weird editing. However, I do think it's entirely possible to enjoy the film more if you like teenage adventures and can be a bit more forgiving than I am. And I also think with the villain twist, it sets up a potentially fascinating conflict in the next sequel if they ever make it, and I think they will. And if they do with it what I think they can do, which is to sort of connect the secret villain and Enola's mom thematically, that would make a ton of sense, and that would be really interesting. But anyway, not to spoil anything, this one I found to be still a sort of disappointingly average movie. Slightly better than the first one, but flawed nonetheless. You can check it out if you like the genre or the cast, but otherwise it's not a must watch.